In an era when almost every part of Africa was colonized by European countries, it's quite a mystery, or should I say, it is intriguing how Ethiopia remained uncolonized despite several attempts. Ethiopia is an ancient African kingdom that contributed greatly to the world's civilization. The history of the ancient kingdom is full of insight, courage, bravery, and outstanding philosophies. Prior to the colonization era, this ancient kingdom had already built for herself a place in human history. Ethiopia remains the only African country that has their native language, Amharic, as a national language. The country also has its own calendar, and according to the calendar, the country is currently in 2015. Ethiopia is one of the countries in the world who played a vital role in Christianity. So, the question is, why were the European colonists unable to colonize Ethiopia? Well, let's start from the very beginning. During the 19th century, European explorers and missionaries started mapping Africa, and because the continent was unknown to them, they described it as a dark continent. However, once they realized that Africa was full with raw materials that could be exploited to fuel the Industrial Revolution, they grew sudden interest in the continent. At this point, these European explorers saw Africa as a new place to invest their money made in industry, and the colonial powers started claiming lands in Africa. Sub-Saharan Africa was particularly attractive to European traders and business entrepreneurs. During this period, Britain's balance of payments showed a growing deficit, with shrinking and increasingly protectionist continental markets during the long depression of 1873 to 1896. So countries like Britain, France, Germany, and other colonial powers saw Africa as an open market that would garner them a trade surplus, that is, a market that bought more from the colonial powers than it sold overall. But there was a problem. When a few European countries started claiming lands in Africa, others didn't want to miss out, and that was how the Scramble began. Countries like Spain, Britain, Belgium, France, Portugal, Germany, and Italy all wanted to establish their presence in Africa and claim lands. Since they were all driven by financial and political reasons, the European leaders then knew that a war among the European countries may happen soon unless all these countries scrambling for Africa brokered a deal regarding who will control which part of the continent. So, on the 15th of November 1884, 13 European countries met with each other for the Berlin Conference, and the conference didn't end until February 26, 1885. The resolution of that conference laid down ground rules for the further partitioning of Africa. During the conference, they agreed that the navigation of Niger and Congo River should be free for all. They further agreed that before a European colonizer declares a protectorate over a region, they must show effective occupancy and develop a sphere of influence. This opened the floodgates of European colonization. After the Berlin Conference, Italy quickly set its sight on Ethiopia as it started to establish its Eritrean colony. The Italians wanted to expand their colony. They wanted Ethiopia to be part of it. So to achieve this, they sent their special representatives for Africa to the port town of Massawa, which was still under the authority of the Ethiopian Empire in 1887. Ethiopia, then known as Abyssinia, sent a strong warning to the Italians that trying to occupy Massawa was a violation of the treaty it signed between Britain and Egypt. But the Italians failed to heed the warning. Rather, they doubled down and started preparing for a battle with Ethiopia at the Sahati fortification with 167 Italian troops alongside 1,000 locals. This bold step taken by the Italians provoked the town governor Ras Alula Ngida, and he made a move to attack the fortification and its inhabitants. This was actually a risky move, and it led to serious casualties for Ethiopia. Ethiopia lost many of its warriors and others were severely injured. Ras Alula Ngida's forces tried their best to gain access to the fort, but the Italian troops were heavily armed with rifles and cannons. When the troops saw that it was a lost battle, they retreated after the initial defeat. Since the Italian troops were in the fort, they were low on ammunition and other war supplies. So they sent for immediate reinforcement. An additional 550 troops were immediately sent to the Sohati fortification. But before they could get to the fort, Governor Ras Alula's spies reported the current situation of Sahati fort. The governor saw it as a perfect opportunity to launch a second attack and chase the invading Italian troops out of Massawa. So he gathered a fresh army and marched back to the garrison before the reinforcement could get there. During this second attack, Ethiopian forces outnumbered the Italian troops. Although they still had superior weapons, they were low on ammunition. After a few hours of battle, Italian troops ran out of ammunition and Ethiopia dealt with them and almost annihilated them. This defeat didn't go down well with the surviving Italians and their authorities. With this, the war was no longer just a political struggle, it became a personal vendetta against Ethiopia. So by the end of January, Italy voted to send a massive military troops back to Eritrea to avenge their recent defeat. During this time, the Ethiopian Emperor Yohannes II decided to withdraw his troops from the area for the meantime. This happens to be a wise move as the Italian forces in that area were suddenly plagued by diseases and were forced to return home. During the rest of the year, there was serious politicking by the Italians. They tried to use divide and rule tactics to defeat the Ethiopian Empire, but it was impossible for them. Emperor Yohannes IV maintained a strong unity across his empire, and his entire cabinet members were loyal to him. Because of the unity throughout the region, it was impossible to invade it. But he eventually died during the Battle of Galabat in Sudan on the 10th of March 1889, and he was succeeded by Menelik II, who may have formed an alliance with the Italians during the early days of his reign. On the 2nd of May 1889, the Treaty of Wuchale was signed at Wuchale, Ethiopia by the Italians and the then Emperor Menelik II of Ethiopia. The treaty granted Italy the northern Ethiopia territories of Bogos, Amasen, and Akale Guzai, the modern Eritrea and northern Tigray, in exchange for a sum of money and the provision of 30,000 muskets and 28 cannons. However, there was something tricky about the wordings of the treaty. In Ethiopia's copy of the Treaty of Wuchale, Article 17 stated that the Emperor of Ethiopia could have recourse to the good offices of the Italian government in its dealings with other foreign powers. Take note of the word they use in the treaty, could. Unbeknownst to Emperor Menelik II, the Italians changed the wordings of their own copy of the treaty. The Italian text of the treaty had the word must, that is, the Emperor of Ethiopia must take permission from the good offices of the Italian government in its dealings with foreign powers. And based on their own text, the Italians proclaimed a protectorate over Ethiopia. Emperor Menelik II didn't know this until September 1890, and when he probed further, Italians tried to defend their actions. Menelik II repudiated their claim, and in 1893, he officially denounced the entire treaty. He moved to consolidate his kingdom and make it known that Ethiopia is not under any protectorate. So there was a widely spread anti-Italian nationalist movement throughout the region. Italians tried to use divide and rule strategy, but it failed. Thankfully, Ethiopia now had superior weapons and ammunition, that they got from Italians and other European countries who were trying to establish their presence in Ethiopia. The aftermath of these events made it impossible for any European country to colonize Ethiopia and made it stand tall among other nations at this time in terms of territorial independence. But this was not the end. Italy didn't give up. They still wanted to establish a protectorate over Ethiopia. So in 1935, the Second Italo-ethiopian War broke out as the Italians made a move to invade Ethiopia yet again. Unfortunately for Ethiopia, the Italians were successful to a certain extent, and Ethiopia was annexed and united to the surrounding Italian possession of Somaliland and Eritrea to create a new colony named the Italian East Africa. This existed until the Italians switched sides in the Second World War and eventually signed a treaty in 1947 and recognized the independence of Ethiopia and required Italy to pay $25 million in reparation. Ethiopia was never colonized because of the country's national sense of defiance, military genius, political genius, undying sense of loyalty to their country, and more importantly, they were all united and supported their emperor. For this reason, it was impossible for any European country to colonize Ethiopia, making it one of the few countries in Africa that was never colonized. However, political pundits believe that Italy wasn't able to colonize Ethiopia because as at the time they were making these attempts, the country, which is Italy, was a newly unified country. So they didn't have the type of weapons and ammunition that countries like France, Germany and Britain had. But let me ask you this. What do you think would have happened if France or Great Britain or Germany tried to colonize Ethiopia? Do you think they would have succeeded? Kindly share your thoughts in the comment below. Thank you.